Okay, checking the mic check. This time with an actual mic.
I've known it from the moment that we made. No doubt in my mind that you belong.
Austin and I started collaborating over 10 years ago. Guess I should start saying with that I'm a general contractor and you're an architect. We were in a conversation of why this construction and building is an industry where it's very adversary. People are always people are never getting along. Contractors don't get along with architects. Architects don't get along with engineers. Engineers don't get along with the homeowners or any one of those scenarios. Or in essence, no one's taking care of anyone. It's just not a healthy environment. And we were curious in the conversation of how do we consciously build things. And back in the days, the designer and the builder were one and the same, long ago. So we started a series of talks that was conscious design build, and it had some very interesting conversations. And 10 years later, we're collaborating on trying to bring this to basically how do we consciously build a village, and how do we consciously come together as a community and live consciously with our environment. So we're in that process, and right now we're working on a project in Colorado where we're exploring how to make that happen. Yeah, tell me how's that for you? How's that journey been for you? Just like what in your life brought you to this moment to even want to be part of this project?
I think it's interesting that we called it conscious design build. We came up with that name, and I think the first question there is to say, well, what does it mean to design or build consciously? And it can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. But I think the essence of what we were exploring is that how can we design and build in a way that is not just transactional. It's not about just making things beautiful or functional, but through the process of designing and building, everybody feels more enriched at the end of the process. So that there's a deeper sense of, for example, for the homeowners, that they not only improved their home, but they also felt that they were part of that. They weren't just hiring designers, architects, contractors just to sort of design it and build it, that they're actively involved in the process, because so much of feeling at home in the world has to do with tending. That sense that we are actually in relationship with things. I think that we were using the word consciousness just to say, hey, there's a different way of doing it. And historically, all buildings were created from a sacred perspective based on how the people were experiencing that, based on people's cosmologies. And I think all too often, especially in the United States, we've lost that tradition in some ways.
We're mostly thinking about the practical.
We're thinking about the price of it. We're going to think of usefulness. There's, unfortunately, with the real estate market, it's like, how much is this going to increase the value of the house? But we're not necessarily exploring what it actually means to be at home in the world. Which is that's a more fundamental, primordial question. It's like, what do we need to do to actually feel at home in the world? Like, why do we feel disconnected in the first place? And what are the ways in which we can do as designers and builders to remedy that sense of disconnect?
Fascinating conversation. We've kind of went our separate ways, and then throughout the years we did some projects together and tap into a little bit of that conversation. So now we're back in it full time. We're meeting 3 times a week, and with a team of 2 other people, really having that conversation. How do we we have 45 acres in Colorado that we're working with, to start with, and then how do we relate to that land? How do we build consciously on it? How do we honor the topography, the watershed, the community around there, and all that? And with the sense of wanting to build what we're calling an eco-village.
Yeah, and an eco-village. And then what even constitutes that? It's another, there are ideas of eco-villages, and basically an eco-village in my mind is there's a community that is conscious of that buildings and human existence doesn't take place separately than the environment, right? And I think that for a lot of us in the West, this has been a real sense of like, oh yeah, there's been a sense of it doesn't really matter what I do here because it'll be taken down. Somebody will take care of it in another way. But now we're at a place with, climatic change, changes in finances, income inequality, political unrest, just the craziness of social media, and also coming out of the pandemic, there's an emphasis on like, what do we actually need to be, one, survive in the future, right, with all the different things going on, but beyond that, how do we actually thrive? How do we experience joy, not only again through the process of designing and by building homes and villages and this and that, but how is it that we can actually make have a deeper sense of connection with all aspects of life, including ourselves, including our partners, including community, both human and more than human, being in touch with both the earth and the cosmos in ways that we as modern humans have sort of lost track of. Yeah.
It's fascinating when you live in accordance with the principles of nature.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of regenerative farming right now. It's just showing the power of that. That if you're tending to a place year over year, you can have more soil, more biodiversity. The land is getting more fruitful. It's giving more year after year,
Mm-hmm.
instead of how we've been doing it. We've been depleting it.
Yeah.
And not only we're depleting the planet, but we're depleting ourselves. I like what Sadhguru says. We, as a generation, we're the most well taken care of generation that probably ever lived on this planet. We're not limited by anything. We live with such comforts, yet we're potentially one of the most deeply unhappy and unsatisfied generation. So because as we're depleting the planet, our external environment is a reflection of our inner world. So I think it all has to start with going back to ourselves. Like when we find it, home within ourselves, then we can try to build home out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
In a sense.
Those things can actually go together simultaneously.
Yeah.
And I think that's the new way of doing is it's like not only are we trying to go from point A to point B, so like here's where we're feeling disconnected, and then somewhere in the future we're going to feel connected and happy and joyful. The idea is that, okay, we're feeling disconnected. How can we start to build that sense of connectivity in each step along the way? From the whole conception of an idea of doing a project somewhere to the steps, so that again, it's not done in sort of in a hamster wheel sort of way, but we're doing it by which is like, how can we add a deeper sense of connection, a deeper sense of contribution, and a deeper sense of meaning all the way along the process, so that each and every part of it is seen to be a valued, joyful experience. So for example, typically if you're working on a ground up or building a building for the first time, you have to work with the foundation.
Yeah.
And the foundation itself is that often it's like, okay, let's just go in. We know where the foundation needs to go. We need to dig holes here, and we need to make it so that we can, support this house. It's going to look this particular way. And it's just like, okay, we got to dig down into the earth, right? Often what's happening is there's no acknowledgement that we're actually digging down into the actual thing that is supporting us. It's not that the earth does not want to support us. The fact that we're even on the planet is a good testimony that, like, yeah, this earth loves having, all sorts of animals, including the human animal here.
Yeah.
Just by having a sense that the earth is also part of the project allows for a new dialogue to come in. And so while that awareness is there, as we're, first of all, before we dig holes, we can start to ask for permission and say, is this actually what wants to happen here in this place, according to a consciousness that is way bigger than any of our own, right? Then that experience of, again, digging is not just a quote unquote drudgery manual labor procedure or something that is backhoed out of there, but actually becomes, again, a vehicle for connection.
It becomes like a communion in a sense.
Exactly. You're beginning to commune. You're communing with the land because you're no longer seeing it as an object out there that you can just utilize in any way, but it's actually an awareness. It's a being that you can start to relate to.
Asking for permission.
Asking for help, asking for advice.
Yeah.
Asking for insights, how to do things differently.
Yeah.
So much of eco-building and eco-friendly design has to do with actually looking at a landscape and saying, what are actually the natural characteristics of this landscape, and getting to know it.
Yeah.
And starting to understand how does the light feel at different times of the year. What is it like? Where does the wind come from?
Yeah.
Where, what is it like does it freeze in that area? Those are all ways in which you can start to understand how the building itself can have a living relationship with the environment around it, including the movements of the sun, the moon, the stars, the seasons, all of those things. So it starts to become a home as opposed to a place that that maybe makes you feel separate from the world. You can design it in a way that makes you feel more cognizant of the cycles of life as they're happening.
So yeah, I love what you're saying, and it makes me think, because a lot of times when someone says EcoVillage or something, or green sustainable living, people think of systems again. Like, oh, let's put solar so we don't use anything in the grid, or how do we? It's still from a place of utilization, even though, like, oh, now we're gonna use the sun resources. It could potentially lack that relationship.
Right. I mean, I think of a lot of building quote unquote solutions are very technical.
Yeah.
And what's missing in that is the relationship, as you said.
Yeah.
So many folks do want to, have a sense of, like, yeah, we need to help. We need to make some changes. We need to save the earth.
Yeah.
Right. But the reality is that it's the earth that has been providing for our well-being in each and every moment of our lives, always and unceasingly. And so, yes, there are things that we need to do in order to correct our relationship as human beings to the earth, but it doesn't happen without our ability to, first and foremost, start to commune with the earth.
Yeah.
So without that sense of communion, without that sort of bridging that sense between the earth out there and me out there, if you don't bridge it, you can't have a relationship with it.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think there's a lot of well-meaning people out there that are trying to come up with technical solutions, which are kind of amazing on some levels. I mean, think of solar panels, heat pumps, radiant in-floor heating, thermal massing, and solar gain. All those are amazing. But if we fail to really engage the earth, the biosphere, Gaia, as an active player within the design and build process, then we're missing out on a huge sense of connection and resourcefulness that is way beyond our limited minds of human beings even to contemplate, to comprehend.
Yeah, that is so That is so key. The best word for it is to relate, to commune, to listen. Where does this, what does this land want? Maybe you bought the land where you want to live on there, and then you find out that that's not what it wants. Once you start building this relationship again, going back to what I was saying about regenerative farming, is you start to build this relationship and you have that conversation and you start to build biodiversity. The more you give, you've seen the seed of a redwood tree, a sequoia, it's like this big.
Right.
And you give her that little seed, and then it'll give you a 300 feet tall tree. That's the power that it has, only if you're willing to have the rightful relationship, the relationship of honoring. To me, that even puts the idea, if you connect to that concept, the idea of sustainability just out of the window, because I really don't like the word sustainability because it means sustaining. Right? Nature is not designed to sustain. Nature is designed to evolve and constantly rejuvenate and grow. And like I say, year after year, you have more and more soil. Like in the Midwest, we used to have 17 feet of topsoil, and now it's down to a foot. And if we did that instead of 17, now it could be 34 feet. Like when we use the word thriving, it's not just thriving in the sense of like some noble idea. It's how this planet, how this nature works. It thrives. It gives so much life to so many creatures. We being one of them.
And you can also start to relate to it on the different sort of levels. If you think of kind of different elements that exist in different tradition, you have earth, water, fire, and air.
Yeah.
So those are ways in which you can start to look at that. Okay, these are fundamental aspects of and building blocks and arenas by which we can start to look at how can we best work with these things. So the earth, is the thing that we're sitting on right now. We build on the earth. And then there's the water element. Of course, none of us would be here without water. And water is an incredibly important aspect of that. I guess we're about 99% water by molecule. We have more water molecules in our bodies, 99% than any other molecule, just by sheer number. Of course, we have water in our house for drinking water, for washing. Currently, typically most sanitation and sewers are using water in order to remove that, which is that's up for grabs right now. I mean, there's other different systems that don't waste water in that manner. And then you have fire, which is equivalent to energy. It's the sun and of course the molten material down inside the earth. So there's fire outside and inside, which allows for geothermal, other different ways of heating things and utilizing that. And there's also the overuse of fire in terms of fossil fuels, where we've been burning things and emitting more carbon into the atmosphere. So all of these are ways that we can start to think about that. And then of course there's air too, the atmosphere. The atmosphere right now has a lot of carbon dioxide in it because of all the burning of fossil fuels, because of the non-renewables being utilized. That's also something we need to look at as well. All these are systems, right? These are all systems that we need to understand how they can work together better. We can start to build a deeper relationship to our own sense of home by engaging these elements in better ways.
Water is a great example because there's enough evidence at this point, enough studies and stuff to show that like water is basically but water has memories. But water can be programmed, but we relate to water as commodities. Like I need water to shower, I need water to flush down my feces. Just we use water as such a commodity. There's no relationship to the water, and the relationship to the water is almost instantly. And like there's been studies even overnight, if you freeze water and you write love on it, right? Like I think everyone probably know at this point that the water molecule changes just in a very short period of time. And the other thing is water, because it's H2O, there's 3 molecules. The way they bump together, the way water always travels is through a centrifugal force. It always goes like this. But when we build our plumbing, it's all right turns. So actually the water goes and hits a right turn and goes this way under pressure. At the end, we have what it's called, people call like dead water. When you measure aliveness in that water, even if it's filtered, even the way we filter the water, the same way we put it to all these processes, so in the end we can have a final product that we could use to hydrate ourselves, that it's clean for us to drink. But there's no honoring of what the water needs, what it took for that water molecule to travel all the way from the ocean, evaporate, go to the sky, come back, find its way through some body of water for us to grab, put it in pipes and get it to me. Again, lacks that relationship, and water is like one of the most obvious places to see. And as you say, 70% water or 99% like by molecule, you putting that water into yourself and it's dead water, then you're gonna feel dead inside. Because you are mostly water. If you start to develop this relationship, even if you're holding in your hand, you're like, thank you for giving me life, and you start to have that relationship, that water is going to start acting within your body literally in a different way. Those are the relationships that go from that, how do you drink a cup of water, to how you build a home that addresses all these things. So again, eco doesn't mean necessarily like the most efficient way to use water, but maybe we'll build our plumbing in a way that doesn't have right angles and stuff.
There's a threshold that's being crossed here by where people out in the world right now are recognizing we need to do things differently, and it really has to happen on a system-wide scale. For example, we have to think of how, for example, education is being mixed with finance, which is being mixed with water, which is being mixed with healthcare. All of these systems that created in a time of, again, human beings over here and the world out there, we're now having to start to create new ways of beings that are recognizing that that the human beings and the world around us are inextricably linked, always and unceasingly. And so we need to start to create systems and ways of beings that start to honor that. And so many of the good ways of working with that, in terms of the engagement of the land, come from primordial wisdom traditions, right? Typically indigenous. But then the other aspect of it is we also need to use the best of technology that we have right now available to us to make things more efficient, to make things more sustainable, to have products that don't just have like one end use, but that can be easily recycled back and reused within the system. And even having data to understand and be able to measure if the things that we're doing are actually making things better or not, so that we continually to have feedback loops that are monitoring, well, how is this working with the carbon imprint? How is this working with the extraction of different building materials from the earth? What are the things that we can utilize that are readily available? But not only that, and getting people, again, not just as consumers of homes, but to actually allow them to be creators of homes as well, so that they feel their own participation, tending, sweat equity, and creativity infused into the places that they occupy, that it's just not another consumer good. So that's another thing that we're trying to work on in this project in Colorado is that how do we get through not only the conception and designs and layout of things, but how do we get people actively involved in the sense of coming back home, returning to home, again, within themselves, within their partnerships, in community with the earth and the cosmos.
I love how you went all the way to the cosmos. It's another way we're so disconnected, right? Like our ancestors, one of the biggest show for them was looking at the night sky. And for most of us, that's not existent. Or a big percentage of the planet doesn't necessarily has a night sky because of the light pollution. To me, when I'm in a place where I could see the night sky, where I could see the stars, just reminds me, humbles me, reminds me of how insignificant and how small I am as part of the whole intermingling of things.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I love like there's places like Sedona, for example. You know, they have like awareness of light pollution. So there's so many things. So it's not just like how do we build a house, and how do we live in a place that is like net zero in terms of energy. It's so much more than that, so much deeper than that, and that's the conversation that we're in and what we're trying to build in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
Well, tell me a little bit about community, because you know this is it's a very interesting conversation, especially in America. I've heard like studies that on average American have like 1.2 friends or something.
Mm.
We have like a loneliness epidemic. People feel so isolated and alone, and don't necessarily feel like they have close friends and community.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see us coming together, like in an eco-village, where obviously it's intended to be more like a village, like a tribe, where we have to live together? And that's the beautiful thing. If you know, so many people want to live off the land, but living off the land, it's a lot of work. It's impossible for one person to have a homestead. I have friends that have homesteads, and they're like, okay, I don't know, we went over our heads. It's a lot of work. It really kind of almost forces, if you want to live off the land, to tend to the land. We need each other. We need that community. So anyway, if you could speak a little bit about community.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think first of all that we're communal creatures. You know that we're social creatures, and so you're right. The the current Surgeon General would say, Vivek Murthy would said, is like we are in a loneliness epidemic, and that loneliness epidemic is responsible for basically a person who spends themselves isolated and for feeling lonely a significant time. If you look at the end of their life, it's the equivalent of basically smoking two packs of cigarettes a day. We are creatures that are social creatures, and if we're not in that social mix, we're not interacting with other human beings, we suffer physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. The other thing is here, which in the United States, this is basically there's been a long time sense of that the individual is the most important thing, and that each individual should be a self-made man or woman. You know, there's this myth of the self-made man or woman, and of course, that is completely ridiculous, because every human being, you know, for the first several years of their lives are basically completely helpless.
Yeah.
Right? You know, we are the most helpless creatures when we come into the world. If you look at other mammals, they're walking within minutes of being born, and we're, you know, that doesn't happen for months, sometimes over a year, you know, for the children to start walking. So that means is that there are people that are caring for us, but the care and the level of care has been in sort of dire opposition to the sense of I need to make it as an individual, right? Even Frank Sinatra's like New York, New York. If I can't make it there, I'll make it anywhere. This sort of thing, this sort of bravado.
Yeah.
But it's lonely. Like, it's not that fun. Not only is it not much fun, it's actually unhealthy to be alone a lot of your time, you know, to spend your life in isolation. And so the other thing is that, again, when you have all these households that are basically just tending to themselves one after the other, and everybody is needing to have, like, you know, say you have 10 houses and there's 10 vacuum cleaners in each one of those houses, it's like that, you know, a thing that could be used by everybody, suddenly everybody feels that they need to have their own resources there.
Well, forget vacuum. There would be a family of 3 that have 5 cars.
They have 5 cars and the whole thing. And so, so Christian here is from Bulgaria, right? Where there wasn't a whole lot of, like, United States is the biggest consumer anywhere, right? You from Bulgaria, so for me, growing up, it's like I was trying to figure out, you know, how would I pay for something? You in your country, which was not particularly wealthy financially, but the gift out of that was there was stronger relationships between people, because people knew that they needed to lean on one another in order to survive. Okay, beyond that, we need to lean on one another and be see others and be seen by others in order to thrive.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost impossible for you to do that unless you're a renunciate and you're doing it for religious regions where you're like sort of stepping out of the flow of things, which is also a very noble pursuit. Most of us need to understand and start learning the process of working more together, right? The other thing about this is that when you are limited to, when socializing is seen to be not a necessity or something just that happens after you take care of more important things, that leads you to really sort of unrich, unenjoyable relationships, because all you're doing is maybe going to events together, having dinner parties, you know, partying or something, or maybe going on a vacation, but it's inherently unsatisfying because you're not actually in a place of relating, of relying on people, of making things with people,
Yeah,
of producing things together, creating,
Yeah.
you know. This is the other thing, is that every human being is a creator, and less than half the people in the United States and around worldwide, around a quarter, only about, you know, a quarter of the world's population see themselves as creative.
Yeah.
And which is, it's crazy, because that's exactly, we are creators. We are bipeds that make things.
Yeah.
And so that's another element of when you start to tend to gardens, when you start to work on your homes, when you start to tend to others, when you share, when you say, hey, I'm working on this, can you help me? Suddenly, we're not just hanging out together, we're creating and making things together.
Yeah.
And that's another aspect of this project we're working on. We want to have places where you can grow food. We also want to be able to regenerate the soil, but we also want to have maker spaces by which the people that live there can intersect both the local and wider economies too, by offering goods and services and things that they make. Maybe they're artistic, maybe they're technological, but that they're people working on things together,
Yeah.
you know, because it's more satisfying to do it that way.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Just to put it for perspective, as a question to meditate on, which the answer would probably be pretty obvious.
Mm-hmm.
But if I offer you $10 million, but with the idea that you won't have another human interaction the rest of your life, would you take it?
Mm-hmm.
So then you could put almost perspective like, oh, yeah, human connection is worth more than $10 million or $100 million. Like, what are you going to do with that money if you lack that human connection?
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that's very interesting to me in America as an immigrant is this, like, people are so picky. Like, oh, he's this way, she's this way. And where I come from, like, in Bulgaria, people are very direct with each other. Like, they're like, oh, you're full of shit, or you look like shit, or like, oh, you put on weight. Like, they'll just tell you, like, straight in your face. So in America, people are like easily butthurt, one. And two is like when we talk about communities, like, well, I'm community, but no with that person, or no with that person, or no with that person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like looking for some ideal thing that again, in nature, everything works. The things that are opposing, supposedly, is what creates the magic and the beauty.
Mm-hmm.
It's these forces that you think, oh, this is bad, let's protect ourselves from this bad thing. But by protecting for that bad thing, you're messing with the rhythm of the whole thing, how the whole thing adds to something else.
Mm-hmm.
My friends who might know me that, I like to maybe complain or, even could say judgmental at times, but I could be judgmental about someone, but never impacts how much I love them or the fact that I wouldn't want them in my life or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would always try to find a solution. Very interesting, kind of like looking for this ideal person to like, well, I'll do a community, but with the right people. And I think there was a study somewhere, or some psychologist or something, I don't remember exactly. If you remove the black sheep of the community, a new one would form somehow from inside the communities.
Mm.
We have to learn to work together, work with each other, and learn to appreciate each other and learn to celebrate our differences.
And also to heal together.
And to heal
to
together.
work things out. I mean, the black sheep is also often the person that is basically consciously or unconsciously bearing all the unprocessed challenges of that community.
Yeah.
You know, whatever is seen to be like a shadow aspect that's not being dealt with, there's always going to be some form of consciousness that's basically saying, hey, you may be pretending like this is okay, but there's a lot of hurt that's being done over here.
Yeah.
And each and every one of us has a part in that. Like all of us have to look at where we come from, because we are all different in certain ways. You know, you've had your experience in growing up, I've had mine. You know, everybody is, you know, working things out in their own particular way, but we need to be aware of that. All of us, you know, have been in suboptimal conditions, especially in the West, simply because even though we have material riches, and even though we have, you know, all sorts of infrastructure and ways of consuming things, we're often bereft spiritually, emotionally, physically. It's taking a toll. It's taking a toll on us. It's taking a toll on those we love, but it's also, of course, taking a toll on the planet, the Great Mother, you know, and has been for a long time. Because if we're not dealing with those things directly, you know, if we're not, then we're compensating in one way, shape, or form. And one of the ways that we compensate most easily is we buy things, you know, durable goods, food, entertainment, whatever it is. Those start to become the things that we lean on when we lack genuine connection with other people.
Yeah.
And not only genuine connection with other people, but when we lack enjoyable, enriching activities with people, you know, not just going and watching a soccer game or a football game or something and being sort of, you know, on the sidelines looking in, but really being in those spaces where you are actually interacting and ideally learning about one another, healing from something, or co-creating or stewarding something. There's ways in which, you know, life becomes more meaningful just by us stepping in and saying, I'm going to take care of this.
Yeah.
I'm going to be responsible for that. You know, I'm not going to be on the sidelines anymore.
One of my favorite saying, it takes a village, and I think you can say it takes a village about so many things. Usually that's used most often, I think, for raising children. And just the idea that two people have to raise one person, that is insanity.
It's insanity, exactly. That's not the way that humans used to do it. You know, the nuclear family is a disaster. Your spouse is to be, of course, you know, your intimate relationship with who you're with. Yes, that's an important, you know, that needs to be maintained. But without having other relationships around you that are helping to maintain, without having other, you know, families around you, if you have kids by which the kids can interact together, without having an infrastructure in place that supports those relationships, as opposed to saying, hey, we're going to have you forego those relationships so you can go work to go buy things that are actually not making you happy or satisfied in the first place. So all of those things need to be tended to. This is the systemic things that we're looking at. These are the things that we are exploring within these projects. Like, how can we do this better? How can we identify what people actually need in order to feel at home in the world? What are the core human needs?
If we just take that, takes a village, and I think also takes a village to have a thriving relationship. Takes a village to have thriving land. Takes a village to have thriving business. Takes a village to have a thriving anything. We need each other, and again, technology is awesome. And these days, there's an app for everything, or there's some kind of technology for everything. Technology is their tools. I mean, right now we're using technology to communicate and share this with the world. But yet, we could have been having this conversation on Zoom while you stayed home and slept in, and I stayed home and slept in. But I drove for an hour to come here with you. We walked up, we sat down, we had lunch on the land, we commune with the land, and we have this conversation here. You can combine the two, because they're tools. Like any tool, how do you use it? Even a tool like fire, or you can cook a meal on it, or you can burn down a forest with it. All these many aspects, I think we could keep talking forever. Is there anything you want to share? Anything specifically you want to share about this project in particular? What excites you? What you like enjoying about it so far? What you're looking forward to being a part of this project?
What I love about working on this project is that it allows me to take a lot of the work that I've done over the last 2 decades of working in the world of architecture and design, and start to take on a broader perspective and sense of responsibility. And specifically with everybody involved, what I'm looking at is that are their core human needs being satisfied? Basically, are they feeling connected or disconnected? Do they feel that they're contributing or they're done, or not? And what are the meaning systems that are actually informing the decisions that they're making within the project? That sort of thing. So again, looking at those core human needs of connection, contribution, meaning, and then cross-referencing those with is like, how can we make this beautiful in a way that makes people feel more connected? How can we make it more functional so that the people, in whatever way they want to contribute, that they can actually feel and have the resources that they need, including other people around them, so that they feel that deeper sense of contribution. And then when we look at the meaning space, like in terms of that need for meaning, how can we actually create intentions behind the project that are actually fulfilling those things that are most meaningful to us? The connection with friends, the connection with family, the connection with community, the connection with land, really rebuilding that sense of working together and leaning on one another, and also recognizing that none of us can do this alone. We need experts in water, we need experts in building, we need experts in design, we need experts in understanding how to tie together a solar voltaic system with a hot water heating system, with a composting toilet system, and all of these things that can basically, again, through the process of thinking these things through and through the process of including others and their physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual needs, how can we, again, in relationship with the land, make everybody more healthy? That's the basic idea that I have about that, and why I'm interested in working on this project.
Yeah.
Again, because it's not just like a single family home that we're working with here. Those are just single business. We're trying to work all of those things together so that we have spaces, again, where people can sleep, places where people can eat their food and grow their food, places where people can share their talents and wisdom, places where people can create things together, and places where we can repair things, places where we can have councils and initiations, and places where we can honor births and deaths, and places, again, in harmony with the land so that we can experience all the elements of earth, water, fire, air, and space, so that we're consciously and conscientiously utilizing the best of what humans have to offer to actually make the world truly better, that we are being regenerative in everything that we're doing.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
How about for you?
Thank you. As you were speaking, the word beauty popped at me, and I was like, I've said this before, but I think I've always asked myself the question: if you look at humans as a species, we ask ourselves often, what is our purpose? What's my purpose? And it's I almost find that it's an unhealthy question to even ask. Almost like, what is your purpose as a species? Kind of like bees pollinate, right? Like worms make soil. What do we contribute? I find that our superpower, in a sense, is creating ambience. Like, we could build a temple, we could build it in such a way, and it's oriented and it's honoring that relationship with the earth and with the way they build the pyramids and stuff like that, where you walk into certain temples that are built in that, and all of a sudden you're like in awe. You're teleported into a new different dimension, and you can walk into a garden that's tended in a particular way, and you're in awe, and you creating that. The ambience is such a big part, I think, to the whole environment, because even there's a lot of saying that if you let nature unattained, it shortens its lifespan. Everything has a lifespan. Like, we have lifespan, but a forest has a lifespan. But if that forest is tended to by humans, like the way the natives were tended to, especially here in California, it prolongs that life. It expands that significantly. beauty and ambience. It's like, how do we build, like, when you walk into this village, you have a sense of you're walking into a different environment, and all of a sudden you go through a threshold of that piece of land that's been tended with love and care and beauty. You're like, wow, I'm in a different place here. And I think we've experienced that many times in our lives. We walked into someone's house, a temple, sacred site, like when I was in Chichen Itza. Like the moment I got into Chichen Itza, the energy was palpable. It was very different. To me, it's how do we create beauty, ambience alongside of all these, like as we build this relationship, where the human touch is adding to the space, not just distracting from the space.
And I think that comes down to the way in which we do that is that we have clear intentions. We have a sense of the why we're doing it in the first place. And the why is beyond, again, as you say, the form and beauty and the function of a space. That we're actually saying, why are we doing this? And it can be as simple as we want to create a regenerative experience for people who walk on this land. Or we want it to represent the consciousness that exists in all things. Or we want this to be a place where people feel loved. When that intention is clear, and the intention is held by different people within the group, that intention gets infused into all the things that are built. And that's one of the other major, incredible, magical things of human beings, is that what we think, the intentions we think, the intentions we create our reality.
Yes.
And we all have this experience, right? We can see, like, when we're having a bad day, we see the lens, we look through the world through a lens, of a bad day, of trickiness, of like, oh, the world's out to get me. And when we switch that lens out for whatever reason with a lens that's basically one of optimism and joy, we see we're in the same landscape. It's a whole different experience. So when it comes to creation, setting good intentions and having a sense of the values that we're doing beyond just the transaction monetary values, beyond all that, it's like, how are we going to make people feel more connected? How are we going to make them feel more like they're contributing? By creating those meaning systems in there, how does that allow people to organize in ways that are beyond what we're doing right now, which is basically kind of in the rat race of the market, of the transaction, of the consumer, of the I don't have enough time to this blah, blah, blah.
Well, I think that's a beautiful place to kind of end it.
Blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Let's end it with the blah, blah, blah.
The beauty and the intention. I think it's pretty clear to the listener that to us, an eco-village doesn't mean net zero. We can live independently. This land can provide for this group of people. We don't need the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, this is a business that we're building, where we want to build many of these around the world. We want them to be interconnected. Well, thank you for sharing.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for listening, if you made it this far.
Thank you for listening.
Please follow, like, and we'll have more to share with you. If you want to be involved in this project, or if you're working on projects similar to this, please share with us. We'll keep growing and learning together.
I hope.
Thank you. Thank you.
If it be your will that I speak no more, and my voice be still as it was before, I will speak no more. I shall abide indeed. I am spoken for the will. If it be your will that a voice be true from this broken heel, I will sing to you. From this broken heel on, your praises they shall ring. If it be your will, let me sing. If it be your will, if there is a choice, let the rivers fill, let the hills rejoice. Let your mercy spill on these burning hearts. If it be your will to make us well and draw us near, oh, bind us tight, all your children here, in our rags of light, in our rags of light, oh, dressed to kill, and in this night, if it be your will, if it be your will.
Thank you.